dance to us today. I'm grateful for Mark, as Chad shared. Mark is committed to protecting for these 2 days, yesterday in the North Central region, and here today, and then tonight in the Warren Association. So thank you for coming to Kentucky. Mark is the Director of Pastoral Wellness for Guidestone Financial Resources. He has pastored, he served as senior pastor over a period of 27 years prior to coming to Lifeway, where he was an associate vice president there at Lifeway, and then went to Oklahoma Baptist Convention, where he served as the director of pastoral development there, and just recently transitioned in April to Guidestone. Okay. Mark is the co-founding leader of a network called Care For, the number 4, Care For Pastors. Mark, thank you for being here today, and kind of share what we've got later in our day.
Thanks, Alan. Hi, guys.
Good
Morning. I hope we leave encouraged. That's why I'm here. I want to encourage everybody and welcome anybody's online or watch it later. It's always a great privilege to encourage pastors because that's what I am. That's what all of us are. Regardless of what your org chart says, your gifts and calling are clearly for the Lord. Those of you that get to pastor pastors like I do, wow, what a blessing. It's actually a great day to be a pastor advocate because pastors are listening, pastors are learning, and we're growing together. It's been a tough week to be a Southern Baptist. We got a bad report card, and it hurts. We're not sure what to do or say, but we want to do something to help victims. We just want to be good pastors. We want to protect people, and let's just keep praying for each other, praying for Anaheim, we're families. Now, when families are all dysfunctional on some level, right? All churches are families that are dysfunctional, but not everybody gets their laundry put out like us, but so it's hard. But I want you to leave encouraged. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through 4 areas, 4 of the greatest challenges that I've seen. This is not officially Guidestone or Lifeway or anybody. I've taken research from all kinds of places that have talked to pastors, and I've kind of talked to pastors myself for the last 7 years. I've still pastoring churches as well as an interim level, as I've pastored pastors in Nashville and Tulsa. I've got to interim and just rolled off one in Tulsa before I moved to Dallas. So I have what Dan Garland calls the stink of the church still on me. And we have just come through a couple of the toughest years I've ever experienced in the last 35 years of pastoring. As a pastor advocate. So these unique challenges are somewhat COVID related, time-wise, in the order of importance. And these are not scientifically order of importance, just my opinion is what they are. And then I'm going to end with some reasons soul care is so important. And when I say soul care, I'm talking about self-care. And I'll explain more about what that means later on. So I do work for Guidestone, and I want to put the slide up and say Guidestone because every time I say Guidestone, I get a raise. And an angel gets its wings. So I'm thankful, but the guy that hired me in Oklahoma hired me a second time. Shortly afterwards to come to Dallas, he said, I'm going to Dallas, I want you to go with me. And so I was, however, I tell my wife, because we just moved into our house. So these challenges are challenges that I think we're all facing. Whether you're a senior pastor right now or pastor in a church, association, convention, and some of you more than one thing, I want your input too on what you see and what you hear. And Guidestone's trying, I mean, this is a new position there. They've been serving pastors for over 100 years, helping them with physical and financial stuff. But the whole of the person is kind of clarified in the Great Commandment. When the smartest guy in the room asked Jesus what the greatest commandment was, we all know what the answer was. Actually, he did too. He'd been saying it twice a day his entire life. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. The Shema, he quoted twice a day. His parents and grandparents, great-grandparents did too. So everybody knew that. Everybody's head nodded. But in that is the most comprehensive way to describe who we are. We have a heart, a soul, a mind, and a body. And so when we're healthy, our churches are healthy. And when we're not, our churches eventually are not as well. And so when I talk about pastoral health, that's kind of what I'm talking about. When I talk about Great Commandment pastors, I'm talking about pastors who love the Lord and love the neighbor, starting with their wife, kids, which makes our profession very unique in that, as far as I know, and I do want to know if there's an exception, but I've been asking for about 7.5 years this question all over the country: is there another profession? Have you heard of one besides ours that requires that you win both at work and at home? So that's not a rhetorical question. Have you heard of another one besides ours? Because I've asked that at every seminary, some of them, several of them, 5 times, different trips, different events, and state conventions, associations, and it feels a little heavy because we all know that. We all know our job description. We all know our wife and kids are in there. And it talks about managing our lives and our homes. And so all that's important. All that's important. When we talk about the 4 challenges, I've shifted the order here and there, but here's where I am today. I feel like these kind of challenges cascaded, but the first in the last couple of years and still today, the top challenge, the first challenge I should say, maybe not the biggest, but the first is in the area of confusion. Confusion. I was pastoring in Tulsa, so the confusion was real there. As you know, do we go? Can we legally gather? If we do, how do we gather? And then the whole mask or not mask, and the whole thing was, as pastors rallied, and we as Oklahoma Baptists were rallying together, best practices, ideas, regathering ideas. Wait, not regathering, sort of regathering. Do we add a service for all the people that are going to come? Because thousands are watching online I've never met. And then they're like, well, we added another service for more room, but then, half our people didn't show up. And as an average, it ended up being, still today, the national average. And some, there's extreme outliers, of course. Some are growing exponentially beyond what they were COVID, and some are significantly less. But the average is 75%. So that you know that I don't want pastors to feel like I'm not doing this right. So 75% of our pre-COVID is the current barometer and scorecard. And so that's confusing because you have a plan, you change it. You go to plan B, then you go to plan C. And in the 35 years I've been pastoring, I started pastoring in San Antonio in 1987. I was going to the seminary extension there. And then in 91, I planted a church in East Tennessee, in Kingsport area. Northeast Tennessee, was there for the 90s. And my kids were born there. In fact, it seemed like every kid that was born in the 90s in Northeast Tennessee got the name Peyton. Boys, girls, everybody. First name, middle name, you're getting the name Peyton. Everybody named their kid Peyton that time. And then we went to Conway, Arkansas, in Second Baptist Conway, downtown church. And I pastored that church for 14 years and took it through a relocation. But I've never gotten to the point where I've had to adjust plans so quickly. And it was confusing. It was confusing. It feels like vision vertigo, to be honest with you. Because, I'm used to making a longer plan and implementing a plan, communicating a plan, and, the whole thing. We've all learned to do that. But then when you make a plan and a month later you have to change it, and then a week later change it again, I think that this brought up a lot of confusion about what to do. And as a pastor advocate, not only pastoring my church, talking to my people, but mostly talking to other pastors, the most comforting thing I could do is tell them nobody else knows what they're doing either. Because you're thinking, I don't know what to do, and because I'm a pastor and a male, I don't want to admit I don't know what I'm doing. And then, so let me just call it out that nobody knew what we were doing. We were pastoring the best we could, in the circumstances we were in. But as we're trying to lead, confusion's frustrating, dizzying. My sister's got vertigo right now, and I'm getting a play-by-play of how many times she throws up. Because I've never, anybody had vertigo? You had vertigo? Not fun, is it? I've never had it.
It's all.
So you give us a thumb to
Well, you get dizzy.
Yeah.
And like I say, you can throw. I never really threw up, but you're so dizzy, the room's spinning, and all you can do is lay down and hope it stops.
That's a great picture of this challenge. It's dizzy. And then you're reading lots of stuff, and lots of ideas. 1 Corinthians 14:8 says, if a trumpet does not sound a clear call, who will get ready for battle? So bringing people to battle when we can't clearly communicate what the plan is, and it just changes all the time. So that kind of cascaded into the second challenge, which may be a little more obvious, and that's fatigue. Pastors are, in all the surveys that I've seen, and I don't do surveys personally. I used to work for Lifeway and help with Lifeway research, and I still write blog posts for them, but pastors are just saying, I'm tired. 51% just a couple of months ago, in the latest pastors' needs survey at Lifeway, 51 said, I'm tired. 68% said the role of the pastor is frequently overwhelming, which made me wonder about the other 32%. What are they doing? I felt overwhelmed since 1987. I mean, but frequently overwhelming. In other words, this is more than I can handle. 48% actually said that. 48% feel the demands of ministry are more than they can handle. That's from a Barna survey. That one before COVID. So 48% think it's more than they can handle before COVID. I wonder how many now. And of course, we remember Galatians 6:9. Let's not get tired of doing good, for we'll reap at the proper time if we don't give up. We know that. We need to hear that this season is temporary. We need to know that as a convention, as we have not just COVID dust, hopefully, lifting, but also the confusion and grief mixed in with this report and convention politics, and you go, everybody's going crazy. And confusion turns into fatigue. And fatigue looks like different things. For me, I have signs that I'm getting fatigued that kind of show me to pay attention. This is kind of how I'm going to break it down. Just for conversation's sake, you have categories that intermix, but we've got spiritual fatigue. What does that look like for you? And mental fatigue. What does that look like? Physical fatigue. So that you know to stop and do something about it. So spiritual fatigue. Let's look at that. When the very first pastors in all of Christianity, of all of history, got fatigued, what did that look like? Not a trick question. It's a pop quiz, but Pentecost was awesome, right? Resurrection, ascension, Pentecost, and the church was growing like crazy until it wasn't growing. Why wasn't? When did it stop growing for the first time? Well, the widow ward. Like, all of a sudden, they had not all these people to disciple and all this going on, but then they had the women fighting over the women, right? People were taking sides over widows. You know the widow war. And so the pastors did something very radical and counterintuitive. They asked for help. Asked for help. And I found in my ministry that whenever I ask for help, people will rally. People will help. They'll roll up their sleeves. Not all of them. Some of them will yawn. But there's people out there waiting for us to tag them in. But the pastors that keep trying to do everything, they're going to end up like these did. They stopped devoting themselves to prayer and the ministry of the word. So they became spiritually fatigued. And when they stopped growing, the church stopped growing. It's all right there in Acts 6 and 7. But when they started growing again, they gave the ministry away, which we're told to do in our job description in Ephesians 4, to equip the saints to the work of ministry. They gave it away to the deacons. They got back to devoting themselves to prayer and the ministry of the word. And they started growing again. And it says the church started growing again. And I know that's very simple, but honestly, this is why soul care is so important, is if the pastors don't take care of ourselves and stay within the core of our calling, then we're going to get spiritually fatigued. We're going to stop devoting ourselves to prayer and the ministry of the word, the intimate first love of our own, and erosion happens. I'm not saying or suggesting anybody's losing their salvation, but you lose the joy of your salvation. And if you've been pastored more than 10 or 15 minutes, you've been there, right? Pastors told Lifeway Research this needs of pastor survey. You can look it up. Needs of pastor survey that came out a couple of months ago. 72% said, I need more consistency in my personal prayer life. These are pastors in anonymous surveys. 72%, I need more consistency in my personal prayer life. 61%, I need help confessing and repenting of personal sin. 68%, consistency in personal Bible reading, apart from sermon prep. I need help with that. I'm struggling here. 66% said they need help trusting God. And so this is our tribe who's saying, you know what? I'm struggling spiritually. Not saying that they're abandoning the faith, but they're struggling, and they're being honest about it. I know I'm spiritually fatigued when on Monday I'm looking at Scripture and I got nothing. I had not only do I have no ideas, I have no desire to get ideas. You ever been there? And you wonder, why? How did I get here? Because sometimes it's exciting, man. I can't wait till Sunday. And you know, but then sometimes I kind of hit a wall, and I'll usually look at my calendar and look at, you know, it's been such a long time since I've let somebody else fill this pulpit. And I got fatigued. I've been doing too much. I haven't taken care of myself. So what are the signs of fatigue for you? Spiritual fatigue, first of all. What are some yellow lights or red lights for you?
What you just said. You're not getting, shall I say, spiritual guidance on what am I going to preach on?
Yeah.
What's next for our church, our people? Can I evaluate them properly? Some of that is lacking. You're not sure even if we're going in the right direction sometimes.
Yeah. It's good. Thank you for sharing that.
I can tell you feel like you're just going through the motions. It's not spiritual, but you're just going through the motions sometimes.
Yeah.
Get me on guard against that.
Start to feel like your spiritual life is your job, and then you wouldn't disconnect from that. You start to not see the spiritual fruit in your personal life.
Yeah. I start avoiding people. The joy of the Lord is my strength, you know, Nehemiah said. And sometimes the joy of our salvation, it's hard because we have an on button, those of us in ministry. So it's hard for people to see when we're struggling. It's not alarming until it stays a long time. Everybody has a bad day or bad weeks. Paul told Timothy to preach the word in season, out of season. So we shouldn't be surprised when we have a season like this. But with all the confusion going on, all the fatigue, just know this is a more challenging season than normal, and it's temporary. But don't wave it off and hope that you take a trip, it'll go away. This is very important. Mental fatigue. Now here's a confusing one for pastors, which I am one. I'm not a mental health specialist. I took a counseling class at seminary. Didn't make me a counselor. I took a music class at seminary too, because they made me. Didn't make me a musician, right? And the fact is, we don't have to be proficient at everybody else's profession. I feel like in the last 2 years, people are looking at us like, okay, COVID, what should we do, what should not do? I don't know. I didn't go to medical school. So maybe they are all wrong, but if you want to second guess a bunch of MDs, you do that. I don't know. But what I'm doing, I'm getting shots, and I'll get extra ones. Give me as many boosters, load me up, fill my truck. I don't care. I don't know any better because I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a legal professional. I'm not a political professional. So if you think the next candidate, whoever the next candidate for the next position is going to ruin the country or ruin the state, have at it. But I'm going to pastor the church. I'm going to devote myself to prayer and ministry of the word. I'm not going to jump into every argument out there. But mental fatigue is a big challenge. 63% of pastors in this anonymous survey said that stress is their top mental challenge. And let me break down, not because you're dumb, but because we're not mental health professionals, and I had a hard time getting my own head around this. I would hear about mental health, behavioral health, and emotional health. I read about those things, I hear about those things, and it took me a while to figure out that they're talking about the exact same thing. They're using different words. And different professions, just people prefer different language, but they're talking about the same thing. I'm just going back to old school. What did Moses and Jesus say? Mind. So mind is mind. So I use mental health, but the medical term is usually behavioral health, sometimes emotional health. But if you can discern the difference between thinking and feeling, congratulations. Fact is, they're overlapped in Scripture, all the areas. Even your heart. In Hebrew, your heart is something that you think from. Has very little to do with feelings in the Old Testament. It does more in the New Testament, but sometimes it's the soul and the heart are used interchangeably. All that to say is that mental fatigue is that part of us, that internal part of us, that we don't fully understand. But we understand what stress feels like. And we don't necessarily know what depression, if you're stressed out, how do you know if you're stressed out or burned out or depressed? As a pastor, or maybe you're talking to a pastor. How do you know it? They're thinking, they use those words. I'm stressed out. Somebody else used the word burned out. Somebody else depressed. And I had this conversation with my wife 12 years ago. We'd watched, and don't judge me, but we just watched an episode of Reba. And Reba's fake, TV husband was sneaking away to get counseling because he was clinically depressed. Didn't want anybody to know. So Reba, his ex-wife, and his current wife were both thinking he's cheating again. He's out there sneaking around, and he was actually sneaking around going to counseling. After this program, I told Janet, I said, "Do you think I'm clinically depressed?" She stopped for a second. She said, "Nah." And she explained, she said, you're leading this church to relocation, and there's a lot of visioning and money raising, you're still preaching and doing weddings. It's just a lot. It's just a busy season. Plus we had 2 kids at home, and our daughter, our oldest, which today's her 29th birthday. But that time, she was, 13 or 14. It's like a whole youth group had moved into her body. It was the most confusing thing I'd ever seen in my life. I'm like, who are all these people? It was just hard. It was a hard season. She said, you have hard seasons. And yeah, you're right. It's just, Because everybody, I think, gets downcast. But if you stay there, you need to ask for help. If you're stuck, get some help. So I did something, again, very counterintuitive for myself and for our profession. I talked to my doctor. Because the next day, after I asked my wife about clinical depression, I never mentioned it to anybody else, because I was different, in a bad way. I mean, there were no moral meltdowns, nothing worth writing about in any paper. It's just I was different. I didn't like me, and I don't think anybody else did either. I'd just been different for a while. But then I realized my wife's not a mental health professional. I might as well just ask, hey, do you think I have cancer, by the way? You know? She didn't know, I didn't know. And that's what a lot of pastors do. We just kind of guess or look it up. So I talked to somebody who'd been to medical school. In fact, we've been to a couple of mission trips together. And he asked me the questions doctors ask all the time. How you sleeping? How you feeling? How you eating? I was 6'1", 167 pounds. And he said, it's not uncommon for a guy, I'm 57, but 12 years ago, not uncommon for a driven guy in his 40s to become depressed. And he said, you're going to have to change your lifestyle. You're working 7 days a week, you're working way too much, you're not resting, you're not taking care of yourself. And I knew I'd been playing hooky on the Sabbath. I was justifying it with my God card. People applaud me for how hard I work. I had a Superman complex. I was digging my own grave, guys. And this guy says, there's a better way. And he said, I'm going to subscribe something for it. Basically serotonin, the happy hormone. I'd burned through all that. So some artificial version of that to kind of get it back up again, which I took for like 10 months. Helped me a lot. So one week I talked to Janet, then a couple days later I talked to my doctor. A week later, a licensed therapist that was a member of my church, fairly new, set an appointment, came by my office, and she had 2 questions. She said, the first one is, Mark, do you know that you're clinically depressed? I said, yes, ma'am, I do. And she said, oh, good. I said, well, I just found out last week. I don't even know what it means, you know. And second question, are you taking anything for it? And I said, yes, ma'am, I am. And again, she said, oh, good. And she walked through, just in that short conversation, the difference between a chemical problem and a character problem. And just that I didn't have to, the biggest thing I remember about that first session was I didn't have to stay that way. And I felt hope for the first time in probably a couple of years. I was still pastoring the church. I mean, there were no interventions or anything like that, but I brought my doctor and the therapist and my wife, a couple of staff members, a couple of deacons in, and they became the dance team to help me get and stay healthy. And I pastored there another 5 years. We finished relocation. Those were the best 5 years pastoring for me. I became vulnerable. I told the church eventually, a few months later. And I wasn't afraid of getting fired. I was afraid of getting pitied. As a man, I remember one needs respect. I didn't want little old ladies pat me on the hand, ask me if I'm okay. But I took the risk, and it made me a better leader. Mental health is a challenge 1 out of 4 pastors are going to deal with in their life. And most of the time, they don't know what to do. So I give my testimony at every place I speak to pastors. Whether it's ministry couples or just pastors, because if you get there, I want you to know, don't self-diagnose, don't hesitate to ask for help. There's people in this association, you get 2 or 3 associations here, in your state convention. Resources are massive. People know people. Kentucky pastors root for each other. And your conventions and associations work together to help pastors get and stay healthy. And they'll do anything if you just give them a nudge, give them a text. But we need to take the stigma out of the room and talk about mental health. It's no different. It's no less important than physical health or spiritual health. But it's a challenge after COVID. At Guidestone, you may have heard we sell insurance. There's another raise right there.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. You're welcome, Clarence. So you, year over year, 40% increase in mental health claims at Guidestone. Of 250,000 people we serve. 40% increase in mental health claims. You think COVID's done its work? Right now, I was just on the phone all the way here from Lexington for the last hour working on how to help the EC keep a nostril above water. Everybody needs help. I'm not talking about just helping victims. I'm talking about helping us who help victims. I'm talking about us staying healthy. Not about them out there, us in here, and it's being able to diagnose or at least see symptoms of spiritual fatigue, mental fatigue, or physical fatigue kind of helps us, nudge us in the right direction so that we won't stay that way. Pastors, some of them are tired because they've trashed their temples. 56 or 59% told Lifeway they're concerned about their personal consistency in exercise. So we have this stewardship thing in our job description, not only the people we love, our family, but also uses the word manage, right? Twice, actually. The word manage means lead. It's the same word used as the spiritual gifts in Romans 12. But to lead or to manage our lives means that it's all of us. I mean, mental health, physical health, spiritual health. I like what John wrote in his third epistle to his friend Gaius. Dear friend, I pray that you're prospering in every way and are in good health, just as your whole life is going well. Or ESV translates it as it goes well with your soul. In soul and life, in person, these are all the same word. So that if soul's not some nebulous thing, it's you. It's translated mostly as your life, and so Guidestone's been in that physical and financial health lane for a long time, for 100 years, helping people. But pastors too struggle in the area of keeping themselves healthy, and many think they don't have time to do that. But it's a discipleship opportunity as well. So take care of yourself. Fatigue. Y'all seen it? Has it changed in the last couple of years? You feel like pastors are getting weary? I'm gonna prophesy here. I'm gonna prophesy here. Just kidding. I'm gonna make a prediction. Difference. I think if our pastors don't take a significant break before fall, they're not going to have fresh legs to advance the gospel. This summer is a huge opportunity at the end of the core of the pandemic. That this summer is a great time to take a couple of Sundays in a row off, which means you're going to have to equip people. You're going to have to put some people who can't preach as good as you in the pulpit, and you're going to take some time to take care of yourself and recharge and take care of your family. And we haven't given ourselves permission to do that. A lot of them have delayed that, or maybe stopped taking Sabbath like I did 12 years ago and got out of the habit, got in sprint mode, can't get out. But now's a great time to take care of ourselves before fatigue sets in and turns into something like burnout or depression or some other breakdown. So, what's the third one? The third one is frustration. So I have confusion, not sure what to do, I'm not sure what's expected of me to do, I'm not sure what all these people are even talking about, I'm not sure how to shake a hand anymore, or wear a mask, or I'm not sure. To fatigue, I'm just tired. To frustration. Frustration, that's a little easier to measure. You can kind of feel it sometimes. When your church members are aren't as good a mood as they used to be. Have you noticed that? I mean, people in general. And in person, online, the mood has changed and has continued to change. And for obvious reasons, you've got the COVID confusion, you've got the social confusion going on. We experienced quite a bit of that in Tulsa. There was one weekend when we had Trump and Sharpton there the same weekend. Same weekend. There was all kinds of, and you're not sure what to say or do or not say or not do about that. And then all the politics, people so angry, going to different church because you're not saying enough or you said too much, in the political chaos. And it just puts them in a bad mood. Frustration. Almost half of pastors said that discouragement is a current, constant mental challenge. And so 80% said that they expect conflict in their church. 80%. 1 out of 3 experienced a significant personal attack. 39% conflict over proposed changes. So COVID was kind of, it was a blessing and a curse in that there was an opportunity, pretty sweet opportunity to make some changes that churches need to make. Everybody's got different changes that you want to make. If you're not sure the right timing, right opportunity. But I had this vision that there's city dumps, county dumps right now, post-COVID, that are full of puppets and handbells from pastors just making little side trips. It's like, okay, this is my shot right now. And then people come back and like, okay, where'd the puppets go? Somebody moved the puppets. Somebody made a change that was unauthorized, wasn't voted on. Where are the handbells or whatever it is? And it's like people just, it's just gets more and more frustrated. And they used to could watch news to find out what's going on, but now everybody's, all they want to do is they've got an agenda to push. It's hard to find a news channel that's unbiased, in my opinion. So the frustration mounts. And on top of that, you have exaggeration. And this comes out in many ways, but one of the ways is the exaggeration about pastors quitting. So I'm going to take a little time to encourage you by trashing bad stats. I've been pastoring since 1987. In the 80s, in the 90s, early 2000s, you could throw up a stat when you were speaking or writing and nobody was second guessing. But that's ministry malpractice right now, because everybody under 30 is source checking you while you're talking. So you better find out if those stats are true, where they came from, and validate them before you speak them up and pass them on to somebody else. But poor stats about pastors being passed around. The one I've heard the most and read the most is 1,500 pastors are leaving the ministry every month. You heard that one? 1,500. Some say 1,600. Some say 1,700. I've documented them and from reliable sources that don't have reliable sources. So from mainstream media saying pastors are quitting, pastors are quitting. And one guy in Houston, First Baptist Houston, a layman who just retired as an occupational therapist, MD, worked for Exxon, so to protect Exxon workers. He heard these scary, sorry stats about pastors quitting. He said, this is cause for alarm. And he put his own money on the table to do pastor attrition research in 2015. Just look it up on Lifeway Research. It's pastor attrition. Did this huge study. We found 2 things out. One, the source of the sorry stat in the first place. And the other, what the real truth is. And then they did a second attrition study after COVID. Like, they just did 2021 at the end. And what they found in 2015 and 2021, 1.3% of pastors quit every month, or you can extrapolate to every year, which equals 250 a month, not 1,500, and for different reasons. Some of us in here would be counted in that 250 when we stopped being pastor of a local church and started pastoring pastors for a convention or association. So for different reasons, pastors leaving the ministry, which is well within normal attrition And so, but you're still going to hear and read 1,500, 1,600, 1,700 leaving every month. Where did that come from? A straw poll in a classroom at Fuller Seminary while Roger Staubach was still throwing tight spirals. So how did straw poll from California get in under the radar from the 70s? Well, H.B. London put it in his book, Pastors at Risk. As soon as you write something in a book, it's a source. And so people, when you read that, if they source it, and they usually don't, they usually say H.B. London's book. And then you get H.B. London's book, and there's no source in it, because you didn't have to source things before. The fact is, the scary stat's not true. There's all kinds of exaggerated things. You know, one of the articles about, you know, the report that came out about the SBC apocalypse, you know, using exaggerated language to get clicks is just unethical. Some of the other sorry stats that never have been true, 1 out of 10. I heard this when I surrendered the ministry in 1980, this 16-year-old. Only 1 out of 10 will finish. You ever heard that? That surrendered the ministry. No one's validated that with any research. And you're going to have to take into account that 65% of college students change their major at least once. You know, so you're not sure as a teenager what you're going to do, but for those who actually start in the ministry, do only 1 out of 10 finish, or does it just feel that way? Don't pass along something that can't be validated, because it discourages people. Another one I hear, 50% of ministers starting out will not last 5 years. In other words, half of them drop out within the first 5 years. Yet I've never found a valid source for that stat, but it keeps getting passed around like Procter & Gamble, you know, thing. And so here's the current issue of Christianity today. You can get it online, you get it magazine. It's emptied out. Tens of thousands of pastors want to quit. This is the current issue. June, May, and June. Want to quit, but haven't. What has this done to them? You know, sound the alarm. Here's the stuff that's in the magazine. This is from, you can look up this, I'm not going to say his name. Well-known author. Departures of pastors will increase by 20%. He says it's the Great Resignation will hit pastors hard. So basically, for the last couple of thousand years, we've not been quitting in droves, but because of a pandemic, and because we're frustrated, because we're fatigued, because we're confused, you know, there's going to be we're going to go from 1.3% to 20%, according to one guy in this article. You believe that? I don't. I believe a little more in the faithfulness of God and the faithfulness of pastors. To finish, God says, I'm going to finish what I started in you. And I just believe, and I may be wrong, y'all can stone me if 20% quit, y'all stone me. Alright? Another popular author was quoted in there, tidal wave of pastor resignations is coming in 2022. Tidal wave. Do we need more pastors? Yes. Do we need better pastors? Yes. Do we need stronger, healthier pastors? Yes. But it doesn't help to exaggerate things. And then here's the stats I shared with you earlier. One I didn't mention, 1,300 pastors terminated by a local church each month without cause. It's just not true. It's not true. Pastors aren't quitters. Pastors need encouragement. They need help. And that's why we're here. Let's not get tired of doing good, for if we reap at the proper time, if we don't, give up. And I don't think pastors in general are giving up. Now, we all know somebody that we wish was here today. Not just in this room, but in ministry. It's no longer in ministry. We all know somebody who's disqualified themselves or got burnt out or whatever. When I went through my clinical depression, on my staff, one of my staff members was going through chronic depression. That means he had it his whole life. He's been through 2 divorces since then. And a suicide attempt. He was 10 years younger than me. Around the corner from him was another staff member, female, same age as him, in her 30s, married to loving husband, 2 beautiful kids. She had, she was bipolar. And she killed herself on Easter 10 years ago. And so, the fact is, not everybody finishes, and everybody's challenges are different. And I don't want to minimize any of those. And that's why we're here. But at the same time, we can't just broad stroke these to say that, you know, everybody at the end of this pandemic is quitting. The core for this article, by the way, was a survey that came out that by Barna survey that said 38% of pastors are thinking about quitting, which is up from 2 years ago, by like 10% up. So more pastors are thinking about quitting. But then it also quoted 2 separate surveys about the general population, U.S. population, Yahoo and Hartford Institute. Both of these had surveys, and guess what the percentage of the general population that's thinking about quitting their job? 38%. We're no different from the rest of the world. And the fact is, I'm wondering about the other 68%. Are they delusional? I mean, if you've pastored more than a couple of weeks, you've thought about quitting, right? I've thought about quitting a bunch of times. If you want to put me in an article, you can, but I mean, ministry's hard. Just because you're thinking about quitting doesn't mean that you're going to. And the fact is, the rest of the population sometimes wants to quit as well. There's a difference between wanting to quit and actually quitting. And so, don't be discouraged. Don't be confused, because God's call comes with God's sovereign power. That if you're out of season right now, know that there's another season coming. That don't grow weary in well-doing. Hang in there. Don't give up. Don't be discouraged. Just keep serving. Just keep trusting the Lord, and get help if you need help along the way. And we all do. The last challenge wraps up these 4 challenges. It's got confusion, fatigue, frustration, and the last challenge I've noticed is isolation. It really started on the front end as people were kind of, pulled apart, isolated, sheltering in place. I mean, we literally just moved to Tulsa, and we were told to stay at home, And so, fortunately, I had a Brahms less than a mile away, and got some comfort food. But I mean, we didn't have a church home. We didn't have the ability to visit churches except online. And I'm out there serving churches through Zoom meetings and phone calls. But I mean, we're brand new into Tulsa with no ability to make friends. Isolation was a deal. Now we just less than 2 months ago moved in Dallas, and we're looking for a church. Okay, we're looking for a church, not just to get on the roll, but our family, real family, and real friends. Isolation is dangerous. That's why we're going after it, because pastors can get isolated quickly in a crowd. We have lots of friends and lots of people around us, but are we really connected? Proverbs 18:1 says, the one who isolates himself pursues selfish desires, and he rebels against all sound wisdom. Isolation is preventable more than all these other things. You almost cannot avoid frustration and confusion and fatigue. It's going to come. But isolation in Kentucky, and if you're a Southern Baptist in Kentucky and you're isolated, it's your fault. Don't blame anybody else, because there's people all around you who love to be in your life. And nobody wants to be with people all the time, but we need friends. 69% of pastors said, I need friendships and fellowship with others. 4 out of 10 said they're feeling isolated. A few years ago, this guy, Henry Worsley, about my age, decided he would do what no other human's done. He would trek the South Pole by himself. This is a British Arctic explorer, former Army captain in British Army. He was trying to do it Ernest Shackleton tried to do 100 years earlier and failed, was unaided, make a trek, almost 1,000 miles, 7 weeks to the Arctic by himself with no help. And he recorded himself, he recorded every day, do an audio log, take a picture, progress of this tough journey by himself. This is the last picture he took before he died. And here's what he said on the day he took this picture. The 71 days alone on the Antarctic, with over 900 statute miles covered. It's 913 to be exact. And a gradual grinding down of my physical endurance finally took its toll today. It's with sadness I report its journey's end, so close to my goal. So 71 days, 913 miles, he stopped 30 miles short of his goal. He couldn't put one more ski in front of the other. And before they could get him, they couldn't resuscitate him. When I first read that, I read that in the papers, like, I was confused. You know? And it's like, why would somebody do that? I mean, I kind of get the glory of it and all that, but then I thought, that's a stupid goal. Because he could have done it with a team. It's still been great. But unaided, that's dangerous to the point of malpractice. And so his legacy is that. And many pastors try to go at it alone, and it's a dangerous game. Apostle Paul traveled, estimated 10,000 miles, and there's no record that he ever traveled alone. So, in fact, you read Romans and other places, there's a long list of people, we don't know who they are and exactly what they did. We know some of them. He calls out some, like Onesiphorus, says, you know, he often refreshed me, wasn't ashamed of me. He sought me out in prison and refreshed me. Several he talked about refreshing. And do you have somebody in your life that refreshes you? Because Paul said, I did. I had a team. I don't believe in solo treks. I don't think I can finish someday well alone. And even in dark times like this, when it's tougher to be a Southern Baptist, I can tell you, I celebrate the fact that I'm part of a family, that I don't have to do ministry alone. I don't have to do life alone. I'm surrounded by people who would cheer me on and let me cheer them on. And so today, I want to commend you for coming out here. You got a lot of stuff. You got a lot of stuff to do. You didn't come here because you didn't have anything else to do. But you're letting somebody cheer you on. And let me encourage you to make sure your wife has somebody to cheer her on. Because there's a whole lot of isolation that happened in the last 2 years that's caught up with them as well. Because many of them were isolated. In fact, they had to, become school teachers. And they got disconnected and maybe out of rhythm. And maybe they lost contact with some friendships. And ministers' wives, they get disconnected quickly. We did in that first attrition study about how many pastors would leave the ministry in 2015, we asked the question, several questions about the pastor's wife. I was part of that team, that's why I say we. Is 1 out of 10, only 1 out of 10 pastors' wives said they have a church friend that they can count on a great deal. Only 1 out of, let me say it again, 1 out of 10 ministry wives can count on a church friend a great deal. 7 out of 10 have very few to confide in about important matters. And 1 out of 3 said they feel isolated. These are pastors' wives. 37% said they don't get the attention they need from their spouse because the church needs their spouse so much. And so these are big challenges. And I don't think that any of them surprise you. You knew this stuff. You knew the confusion. You've experienced that yourself. Fatigue, frustration, isolation. You see these things. So which just kind of brings us to why soul care is so important in the first place. So I want to give you some reasons, and I want us to talk about them. And I want us to face them together. I appreciate the fact Dr. Gray interviewed me. You may have seen that I appreciate him asking me to come and talk about soul care, talk about you. We're not here to talk about how to grow your church. We're here to talk about growing you. And to do that, we've got to take soul care seriously and prevent some of these things. One, because there's a scriptural issue. In other words, I've got to distinguish myself from, you hear a lot about self-care in secular. So I'm not Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, Dr. Seuss. This isn't just, be kind to yourself. Self-care. This is scriptural. This is Paul. We've talked a lot about Paul's job description. He's going over this with his successor at the Ephesians church, Timothy. Manage your life, manage your home, manage your family. But in the next chapter, he says this. Pay close attention. Or your translation may watch closely. Pay attention. It sounds like something that a teacher would say in class. This is pay attention. Timothy, pay attention to this. To your life and to your teaching. Or if you have an inferior translation, it says doctrine. You know what it means. So don't neglect your teaching or doctrine. But how many disqualified themselves or are not in ministry today because of the second thing? This is important. But how many have left the ministry because of doctrinal things? I've got one or two friends, but most of them disqualify themselves because of the first thing, because they didn't pay attention to their life. Got the doctrine down, but not the life part. And he tells the same pastor, Timothy, as well as his elders at Miletus, the last time he sees them, basically the same thing. He says, Acts 20:28, be on guard for yourselves and for your flock. So don't neglect your flock. Don't neglect the Bible, preaching, doctrine, teaching. But first, he says in both cases, pay attention, be on guard for yourself, for your life, for your soul. Again, it's the exact same word. So paying attention to our life and soul is soul care. Why it's so important? It's scripturally important. Soul's translated as life 104 times in the CSB. And it's translated as person 38 times in the CSB. It's the word psyche. And it's, again, the best way to define that internal part of you, it's you. It's Mark Vance. Even the souls that, how many were on the ship that got destroyed that Paul was on? I don't remember how many, 100 and something souls. There's 8 billion souls. Some are saved, some are not saved. But that's what refers to a person's life, about who they are. And so he says to pastors, pastor, pay attention to your life, to your soul. Because it's a scriptural issue. It's a stewardship issue as well. Stewardship basically is a reminder that we don't own this place, right? It's like we're stewards, and what a blessing it is. No matter how long you're there, you're still a temp. Whether we're all interims on some level, right? We're all temps because we're stewarding God's churches, and what a privilege it is. But the reason I'm reminding you of that is because it takes pressure off of me to know that I'm not the savior of the church. I'm not the savior of the world. I'm not the savior. I can't save anybody. I can't save pastors from stupidity. I can't save sinners from their sins. I'm just somebody who works for him. I'm a steward, not a savior. And so soul care is a stewardship issue, which means I've got to rest in the fact that he's in charge. Sovereignty is one of those things that some people like to argue about, fight about, Calvinism. Sovereignty is supposed to be something that comforts me. That says, he knows stuff I don't know. He's in charge of stuff I'm not in charge of. So since I've been to Guidestone, I actually started in January, officially with Guidestone. Moved in April. You know how much money Guidestone's lost since I started working there? I was telling Hans, my boss, I said, man, I'm pretty expensive hire. Since I've been here, you've lost $1 billion. Yeah, that should. Of course, if your investments are somewhere else, they would have lost, proportionally the same amount. Because what we can't do is we can't control the stock market. We can't control. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. It's going to go up. And some people will freak out and bail out and cash out and then wish they hadn't. Or opt out and wish they hadn't, and all that kind of stuff because they failed to get advice from somebody. Talk to people that know more about it. Get a financial advisor, whether it's God, somebody else, to help you. Most pastors are not good with money, and so they need people that are. And your advisor, I've got his contact information over there next to that stack of books, and then there's a slide up here. His name's Doug. You may know him already. And you have one at the convention as well that will help you with stuff like that. I've always needed somebody to help me. But it's a stewardship issue. First Peter talks about pastors and greed. I mean, we have to manage every part of our lives. But ultimately, what should bring encouragement to you today is to remember what John told his audience in his plain spoken way. He said, I am not the Christ. That wasn't his most famous statement. He must increase, I must decrease. It's probably the biggest one. But at one point he says, in John 1:20, he says, I'm not the Christ. And whether you say it in the pulpit or not, at least say it in the mirror. I'm not the Christ. I'm not the Savior. I'm the pastor. I'm the under shepherd. And so I hope that God blesses this church, but if his hand's not on the church, doesn't matter how clever I am, doesn't matter how far I plan, how well I preach, I'm hosed without him. I'm hosed without him. And so it's a stewardship issue for pastors because we're stewards, not saviors. We're not owners. And you know that. I'm just here to remind you. I'm pretty sure anytime I walk into a room of pastors that there's not one thing I'm going to say they hadn't heard. I'm sure of that. And not only hadn't heard, but that they hadn't preached. They all know it. But we do need reminders. Here's what the pastors told us about themselves. Said, you know what? Here's where I'm struggling most. Time management. So again, manage is in our job description. Manage to lead. If we don't have enough time, it may be that we've not managed it well. Because we have to say no to people, and that's hard for us. Or wait. And time management is always going to be a challenge. And I'm not saying I've arrived. Okay? I'm still working on that. Work and home balance. Here's the thing. The people in our pews are also dealing with these same things, right? So we can teach them by our example. We can teach them about time management, work and home, kids. Don't freak out if your kids rebel. Don't quit your job. Most kids are going to go through a rebellious season. Marriage. Aging parents, that's what we are right now. Second commandment, love your neighbor. Neighbor means nearest one. So Janet's her name, that's the next pillow. And then for 20 years for my kids, before we evicted them, they became squatters after 20 years. So we was like, bye. Now her parents, I'm taking her daddy's, I married a PK, I'm a DK. I married a PK, and her dad turns 92 in June. I'm taking fishing for stripers on Lake Texoma. He doesn't know it, but this week I'm going to give him a card. Already hired a fishing guy because he wants to go fishing. 92. Because he's taking care of his body, he's taking care of his money. Never pastored a church over 200, but he understood what compound interest was and got on the right side of it and lived within his means. He's finishing well. He's a good model for all of us. And physically, he's taking care of himself, or he wouldn't be fishing at 92, right? And he's got some great, DNA. I know Janet's going to live a while longer than me. Financial stress, another thing. These are what pastors are saying that I'm dealing with. And sometimes we need help. Sometimes we need encouragement. But sometimes we neglect ourselves, not because we hate ourselves, but because we're too busy. We're too busy. We have these little reminders. This one reminds me every time when I flew here. One good thing about living in Dallas is that there's direct flight to just about anywhere. But I always get this. You've heard this speech. It's always the same. Every airline, every flight, they're going to take it out. And they're going to tell us, loss of cabin pressure or whatever, this is going to drop down. What are you supposed to do with it?
Put it on yourself first.
Self first.
Yeah, all of them. Why do they have to tell us that?
If you have children, you wanna do them first, or what?
Yeah. That'd be my first instinct. If I got a kid over here, if I got an old lady over there, I'm gonna instinctively put it on them. But every time they give me a speech, they remind me of something I need to know, that I'm no good passed out on that plane. I can't help them if I'm not conscious. What a great reminder for pastors. I can't really help anybody if I'm passed out on the pew. So self-care is strategic. It's not selfish. It's strategic. So when God says, I don't want to compete with your affections. No graven images, no other gods, don't use my name in vain, don't mess with my day. We've got to listen. That last one, though, we play hooky on that. Don't mess with my day. I was reading in my personal quiet time that just happened to be where I'm at in Numbers. Some dude picks up some wood on Sunday, and all of a sudden he gets killed by God. For, initially the Sabbath was enforced by the death penalty in the Sinai. It shows you how serious it is to him. Sabbath only means one thing. It means stop. He's not asking. He's not begging. He's telling us to stop. It's a clear cease and desist order. And pastors play hooky on it all the time. And that's how I ended up getting a therapist, was ignoring the Sabbath. Just thinking I was the exception. You hear people talk about that. I only need 5 hours of sleep. Oh, really? So God made you special. But you don't know what I got to do. You know what? I'm pretty sure the God of the universe can take care of your church on that one day a week without your help. Self-care is strategic. We have to practice this. We have to practice it. Daily Sabbath, walking with the Lord. If you've not been walking with the Lord, taking some time, listen, don't get overwhelmed. I used to get overwhelmed with a 1-year Bible. 1-year Bible is great for people that think faster than I do, but for me, it felt like homework and I was skimming. So I got a 3-year Bible reading plan. So that's 1 chapter a day for personal reading, not for sermon preparation, because that's a better pace for me. Because soul care is strategic, I have a simple plan. I start the day with Jesus, I end the day with Janet. That's my first love, this is my second love, my king and my queen. Janet doesn't want to talk to me in the morning. She doesn't want to talk to you either, anybody. So Jesus is my first love, Janet's my second love, and then in order for me to consistently be a healthy, great commandment pastor, I've got to keep those two, my top 2 relationships, in order of priority, clear. I can't skimp on either of those things. Inconsistency in those 2 areas lead to erosion in other areas. Right? I know you know this. But if Jesus and Janet, either one of them are unhappy with me, it doesn't matter how much applause I get from pastors or churches. My world's upside down, so I'm not turning the other world upside down. If Jesus and Janet, either of those relationships are out of order. But if they're both happy with me, if I'm current with them, I don't need applause. And so what I've had to do in the last 35 years, this summer will be 35 years since I started pastoring, is I've had to demote people. 6 months into my first pastorate, I got married. Now here I'm pastoring in South San Antonio, get married 6 months later. My first demotion was my mom and dad. Genesis 2 tells me to do that. Leave your mom and dad. You can't get more specific than that. Jesus quotes it again. You got to leave mom and dad. You got to demote your parents. You still honor them, but you just promoted your spouse. And by the way, also on that day, I demoted, I think at that time, there were only 7 billion people. Now if you got married, you have to demote 8 billion people. I used to say, that I broke up with 3.5 billion women, but I want to be crystal clear in this 21st century reality. I said no to also 2.5 billion men. And then anybody that's confused in the middle, I just said no to everybody. And when I said yes to Janet, just like I said yes to Jesus, I said no to every God. But in doing that, living that out, the other side of that leave and cleave coin is I not only demoted people when I promoted Janet, but cleave, the Hebrew term for cleave means to pursue hard. It's what I did for 3 years before I said I do. I pursued her. And what he's saying is that the pursuit of marriage, after you leave your parents, the pursuit happens on the other side of I do. That I'm to pursue Janet after I say I do. I'm to pursue her on a daily basis. And that means dating, that means trips, that means times when I demote even my own kids, because my kids are being discipled by the way I treat their mom. And so you demote your kids and your parents, your church members who are constantly cutting in line. And they're not trying to blow up your kids or your marriage, right? But they have a hard time defining what an emergency really is. Amen? Church members are great. But it might be that you need to take into consideration for soul care that the person who can help your soul more than any is Jesus, who will restore your soul, who will take all those who are weary and heavy laden or fatigued, frustrated, and give them rest into their souls. But then the second soul care advocate you have is your spouse. No one knows you better. No one can help you more, but you've got to create margin for that relationship to grow, because if you don't, your ministry will never be stronger than your marriage. And again, they're in our job description. And when you do that, you're modeling that and discipling that for your kids and for your church and so forth. And so this isn't created to be a gotcha moment. This is a gospel moment. This is not a guilt zone. It's a grace zone. So if you don't have a thriving relationship with God right now, or a thriving relationship with your spouse right now, know that pastors do not live in a constant state. It's unrealistic to think that you live in a constant state of revival or a constant honeymoon. Nobody's always excited about the relationship with the Lord or their spouse. And I was talking to a pastor last night who's got 3 preschoolers. 3 preschoolers. I said, listen, this is me and him afterwards. I said, you will not grow your marriage in this season like you did before or like you will again. And you will not date your wife every week. So don't let some fancy pants come in here from Dallas and tell you need to do a date every week and you got 3 preschoolers. You're not going to date every week. It's not possible. That doesn't mean you can't pursue your wife, but you have to do it creatively in a different way. Even your own soul care. You have to, this is the hardest season you'll ever have in your marriage when you have little kids now. But don't let that be an excuse to stop pursuing her. Because my closest friends, my 2 closest bow hunting buddies, both got to their 25th anniversary and got a divorce. Last kid left. Not only was their nest empty, but their marriage was, because they neglected it. It's all about the kids. My brother did the same thing. It can happen. Nobody said, hey, I'm going to blow up my marriage. But they just neglected it. And that's dangerous. I want you to meet somebody. This is a Baptist preacher. He's 93. He's a year older than my father-in-law. Jack Eccles. Jack and Jerry live in North Carolina. And on March 12th, 2020, 2 things happened related to them. Well, actually 3 things. There's first and third. March 12th, 2020. Anybody know that ring a bell for anybody?
Is that when it shut down?
Yeah. That's when the United States government officially declared a pandemic, March 12th, 2020. I was with a group of pastors about this size in Wewoka, Oklahoma. Anybody heard of Wewoka, Oklahoma? I never had, never been there, but the association meeting came. One of them found out, I guess on Facebook, that it was my birthday, and those guys sang happy birthday to me on March 12th, 2020. And we had a good time. They cheesecake. Found out there was a pandemic, so on the way from Wewoka back to Tulsa, I did what every good American would do, and I bought the ammunition and toilet paper because we get ready. So the pandemic started. It's my birthday. Here's what Jack did on March 12th, 2020. He did what he'd been doing for years. For 5 years, Jerry had Alzheimer's. So every day he would go to the nursing home and he would personally feed her. Except March 12th, they said, you can't come back here anymore. We have to close to everybody. My uncle, Tom, I only have one uncle, is the same way. He was going through Alzheimer's and nursing home. His whole family couldn't come visit him anymore. Here's what Jerry did. Jerry went home and packed a suitcase. Jerry's got 2 doctors. Been pastor his whole life. They've been married 70 years. And he goes back, gets a suitcase, gets some goggles. He comes back. He rents a room in that nursing home. And he gets locked in. I read this in one of the news feeds. It was the Wall Street Journal story popped up. And the whole nation was looking at it. Talk about your marriage being a picture and a platform for the gospel. They're like, wow, that just happened. The story goes out, they've got 9 children and countless grandchildren and all this other. And he explains to the Wall Street Journal, says, when they're trying to figure it out, simply, we're married. We're married. So, it's a promise we made. I want to be with her. She took care of me for 70 years, and now it's my turn. This is what a pastor does. For 70 years, he's been a pastor, but he's only had one favorite member, Jerry. That's what a pastor looks like. That I want to finish well. What finishing well means is I'm still in love with Jesus. Still in love with Janet. And I haven't done anything to bring disgrace to either one of them. I don't need to be a perfect pastor to manage my home and my life and in my church. But I do need the same gospel that I preach to everybody else. And the secret is not a secret. To being a great commandment pastor is pay close attention to your life as well as your teaching. Persevere. Don't give up. In doing this, you save not from your sins. You can't save you and others from your sins, but you can save yourself and others from your stupidity. If we pay attention, think of the collateral blessing from our hearers as well. Right now in the Southern Baptist Convention, there's some healthy fear out there. There's an upside to this, is there's a healthy fear that if I do something disgraceful, there's fear of how that could affect other people in my life. But at the end of the day, guys, I look at people like Jerry and Jack and go, I want to be like them. I want to just keep my promises, my covenants to Jesus and to Janet. And every great commandment pastor I've ever met in the last 35 years is also a great commission pastor. Because you love God, you love your neighbors, you're going to love lost people. In Luke's version, that's where the Good Samaritan story came out of that great commandment question and answer time with the scribe. But our neighborhood starts in the next pillar, next room in our family. But I think you and I all met Great Commission pastors that weren't Great Commandment pastors. I've been that guy. Baptizing, growing a church. On stage, I was awesome. Off stage, I was not. So fortunately, we can be Great Commandment pastors and Great Commission pastors, but only with God's help. Father, thank you for these men who love you with their hearts. Maybe some today are confused or frustrated or exhausted, maybe even isolated and alone. So I pray that you'd refresh us, refresh our souls with your own hand, with your own people. Help us, Lord, to celebrate our callings today. And even as we grieve together with some of the stuff's going on in the convention, Lord, help us to trust you together as a family. Thank you for the Kentucky Baptist Convention, their associational partners who've been lifting up pastors for years. And may they be refreshed today. Maybe today in this particular meeting it's more about refreshing the Barnabases in the room. Refresh us, because we encouragers need encouragement. Pastors need to be pastored. Disciple makers need to be discipled. We need you, and we need each other, and we trust you. We trust you for the ability to finish well someday and to glorify you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Mhm.